On the first day the man moved into the house, he encountered an extremely terrifying thing. The fireplace in the living room inexplicably went out, and the bedroom door opened eerily by itself. Just as he was about to get up to check, something unexpected happened the next second. The man became possessed by the malevolent spirit of the house, which belonged to its original owner. The original owner of this house liked all kinds of supernatural events, and he was a very lonely person. Aside from collecting bizarre items, he had no other hobbies. One night, a knock suddenly echoed at the Biddle residence. When he stepped outside to investigate, he found no one there.
Hello?
Just as he was puzzling over it and closing the doorbell rang again. He rushed out to check, but still, there was no sign of anyone. Straining to look around the surrounding woods, he failed to notice that the side door of the house had quietly opened. Biddle began to feel afraid and hurriedly returned home, only for even stranger events to unfold. He was frightened by the series of strange situations, so he immediately went to the basement and locked the door.
Stay away from me! Leave me alone!
Biddle wanted to extinguish the fire, but it was too late. As the flames rapidly spread, he was burned alive in the basement. After Biddle's death, the house became an unoccupied murder house. One day, a bespectacled teacher took a liking to it. The style and price of the house perfectly matched his expectations, so he wasted no time purchasing it. However, during renovations, the repairman informed him that the basement door wouldn't open. Brat didn't believe his words and stepped forward to try it himself, only to find not only did the door not open, but he also hurt his hand in the process. While Brat was tending to his wound, the blood on the ground started to pool together and flow toward the basement. Before Brat moved in, several young men came to the far-flung murder house in search of excitement. They planned to throw a special party there. Just as the power was connected, a short circuit occurred, followed by the basement door opening by itself.
Did you see that?
The others were scared by this eerie event, but the bold Isaiah decided to go down to the basement alone to check it out. The basement was set up in a terrifying manner, and with the light from his phone, Isaiah saw many strange items inside. Soon, the camera on the floor catches Isaiah's attention. Curious, he picked it up to examine it, finding the camera to be in perfect condition, but just at that moment, the basement door suddenly closed, and no matter how hard he tried, it wouldn't open.
Isaiah?
With the sound of footsteps approaching, the group felt a wave of tension. Fortunately, it turned out to be just a prank by Isaiah, who then took a photo of another girl. At that moment, the power was restored, prompting the group to gather a bunch of friends to throw the party. However, not long after, the party was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Brat. He started to drive the young people away, claiming to be the owner of the house. Learning that the other party had called the police, the group of young people immediately frantically scattered in all directions. Outside the house, Allison looked puzzled, then quickly ran into the woods after the others. However, she soon got separated from them. As she anxiously searched for her companions, a figure suddenly appeared before her. Seeing the figure remain silent made Allison feel scared, so she quickly turned to walk in the opposite direction, only for the figure to appear in front of her again.
Allison?
No matter which way Allison tried to escape, the figure was always waiting for her ahead. Isaiah just takes a picture of Margot with the camera from the murder house, and she ends up experiencing bizarre things the next day. A strange shadow appeared in the school hallway.
Can I help you?
When Margot turned around, the figure had vanished without a trace. Shortly after, she suddenly found it hard to breathe.
Not allergy! Go get the knife! Get the knife!
For some reason, the cookie in Margot's hand transformed into a nut. Fortunately, Isaiah arrived just in time to administer an injection to Margot, which saved her. Watching Margot in distress, Isaiah pulled out the photo he had taken the previous night. The scene in the photo was identical to what was happening at that moment, filling him with terror. He quickly realized that the camera was cursed and would bring misfortune to the person captured in its images. He immediately informed James about the situation. When he took out the photo, however, he was shocked to find that it had turned into a blank sheet. Isaiah finally realized that only he could see the contents of the photo. He tried hard to explain everything that had happened to James, hoping to convince him of the camera's curse, but James didn't believe him. So, right there on the spot, James took a photo of Isaiah with the camera. Isaiah took the photo home to review and discovered that he would sustain an injury during the night's game. He was frightened out of his wits by this strange camera. To rid himself of the curse, he rushed into the basement and smashed the camera to pieces with a hammer. Just to be safe, he even burned the camera's remnants along with the photo. Isaiah thought that would solve everything, but just as he was enthusiastically preparing for the game, the bizarre occurrence happened. The camera reappeared, completely intact, in his locker. Isaiah was instantly paralyzed with fear. Surrounded by his teammates, he made his way to the field in a daze. Worried that the curse would come true, Isaiah asked his teammates to protect him during the game. His request seemed absurd to them. With no other option, Isaiah decided to ask the referee to pause the game. But what happened next took him by surprise. In an instant, Isaiah felt as if he were engulfed in flames. Everyone around him transformed into hideous demons, crazily lunging towards him. Yet no one else could see this spectacle. Only a blonde woman witnessed Isaiah's distress. She shouted in an attempt to pause the game, but no one paid any attention. Ultimately, Isaiah could not escape the camera's curse and was taken to the hospital. Isaiah's father stated that he had fractured his arm on the field and could never participate in similar intense sports again. This also meant his dream of playing football was forever shattered. Just when Isaiah felt desperate, Nora suddenly found him.
He's come back, Ben. He's come back to make us pay for what we did to him.
While attending a party at a haunted house, Isabella accidentally saw a strange mask in the basement. Once she put on the mask, she quickly became the center of attention. This mask possessed magical abilities. It could not only captivate hearts but also amplify one's innermost desires. Isabella was very excited when she returned home, and was still savoring the feeling of being sought after. This made her love the peculiar mask even more. However, when she tried to take it off, she found it would not budge no matter how hard she pulled. Despite straining, she eventually managed to remove the mask. Nevertheless, Isabella didn't think much of it, unaware that the mask was influencing her mind. The following morning, Isabella headed to school as usual. Just as she was about to walk out the door, the mask emitted a noise again. Then Isabella somehow stuffed the mask into her school bag. Meanwhile, Brat, who had been possessed by the evil spirit, finally woke up from his coma. Seeing the bottle of alcohol on the table, he initially thought everything that had happened before was just a dream. However, when he checked his phone, he realized he had been unconscious for 2 days. As a teacher, Brat hurried to school, but soon strange occurrences began to unfold. His body seemed out of his control. Terrified, Brat rushed to the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face in an attempt to stay awake. However, he saw Biddle's figure in the mirror. It was then he understood that everything from that night had indeed happened.
Help me find him.
Everything's gonna be fine. You leave me alone!
Isaiah, cursed by the camera, went looking for Isabella, asking her if she had footage from the night of the game. Before that, he was approached by a blonde woman who seemed to know about the horrific scene Isaiah was going through. But just when Nora was about to ask him about something, Ben suddenly appeared and drove her away. Nora has no choice but to give Margot the photo she's holding. The person in the photo is Biddle, the original owner of the haunted house. When Isaiah saw the photo, he immediately recognized it as the referee he saw on the court. In order to find out the truth, Isaiah turned to Isabella from the aerial photography agency for help. After learning about Isaiah's experience, Isabella quickly pulled up the video of that night's game on her computer. She didn't want to disturb Isaiah, so she prepared to check the drone outside. But as soon as she stepped out, she saw a man yank her drone down, destroying it in an instant. After breaking an expensive device, Lucas just wanted to apologize. However, since the broken drone had to be compensated for, Lucas shamelessly proposed paying in installments of $5 a week until graduation. Just as Isabella was preparing to compromise, the mask in her bag started to influence her, ultimately controlling her emotions. She not only unleashed a torrent of insults at Lucas but also scolded the teacher. When she came to her senses, Isabella then reacted to what she had just said. After agreeing to Lucas's proposal, she hurriedly left the scene. Back home, Isabella finally recognized the mask's sinister nature, but it was too late. Under the mask's control, Isabella quickly sought out Lucas. After dealing with Lucas, the mask on her face began to twist, trying to take over her body. Fortunately, Isaiah and Margot showed up just in time, saving Lucas. Back at home, Isabella was still unable to regain her sanity, wreaking havoc throughout the house. The brother instinctively wanted to call his sister for help, but the phone rang from the monster's body. Terrified, her brother quickly hid in the wooden shed, but the monster soon followed. Desperate, the boy called out his sister's name, which finally succeeded in waking her up. With all her strength, Isabella managed to break free from the mask's control. After experiencing the terror of the mask, she unhesitatingly threw it into the river. Little did they know, just after they left, Brat, possessed by Biddle, emerged from the woods. He brought the mask back to the basement. After leading the party, James felt dizzy and was even bounced back by an invisible wall. When he regained his senses, he realized he had returned to an hour ago. No matter how hard he tried to escape the house, he was always thrown back. After an unknown amount of time, James determined that this strange phenomenon seemed to be connected to a clock in the haunted house. He tried to turn it off and carefully approached the door once more. Sure enough, this time he successfully escaped the terrifying time loop. Thinking he was in the clear, James woke up the next day to see someone who looked exactly like him in his house.
Every time you went through the time loop, you created a duplicate version of yourself. That's not how time travel works. It's not how a cuckoo clock works either. Oh my god, what is happening? What is happening?
Terrified by this bizarre situation, he dashed for the door to escape. He wanted to inform his family, but his cell phone was taken away by the clone. Not only that, he was put in a sack, taken to an abandoned factory in the suburbs, and kicked into a mine by the clone. From then on, James's life was completely overtaken by the clone. They go to school like James and keep normal relationships with their friends. Since they each acted individually, no one noticed anything amiss. One day, when Isabella was playing billiards with the clone, the billiard ball accidentally flew towards the clone, and he instantly exploded like jelly. Isabella screamed in fright, prompting everyone to rush into the room to check on her. But before Isabella could explain the situation, James and Red appeared in front of her. The clone explained that it was just a prank, but having experienced strange events before, Isabella didn't believe him at all. She maintained that the James before her was not human. Later that night, the clone threatened Isabella downstairs. Before long, Isaiah and Margot noticed that something was off with James, as he seemed like a completely different person, behaving very differently than before. Just as the two were about to ask what's going on, Isabella simply smashes the replicant. At this time, Isaiah found that the liquid that fell on his body gave off a sweet smell, like some kind of candy. The three then shared a series of strange occurrences that had transpired recently. It was at this moment that they realized that something might have happened to James, and the people who appeared before them now were probably his copies. Think of cursed cameras and masks that manipulate desire, all of which are found in the murder house. So they found Nora together and asked if all this was related to the evil spirit that was burned to death in the haunted house. But Nora asked them to go home and ask each other's parents. Although the three were filled with confusion, their most pressing concern was to find James. They followed the clones to an abandoned mine. The clones sensed their presence and cleverly lured them into a trap. Uncertain whether the person before them was the real James or a fake, they had no choice but to follow him into a cavern. But soon another James suddenly appeared, and they had no choice but to use the most effective method to verify it.
Actually, no, none of us are the real James.
Just then, Isaiah was bagged and tossed into the mine, where he encountered the real James. Seeing Isaiah arrive, James thought he was about to be rescued. However, Isaiah was no longer willing to easily trust the person in front of him. He threw a rock at James. After that, Isaiah was convinced that this James was indeed the original. The two then attempted to escape the mine together. Fortunately, Isabella and Margot found their way here through another passage and successfully rescued James and Isaiah. Unfortunately, they hadn't gotten far before the clones caught up with them. Seeing this, James quickly picked up a wooden stick to use as a weapon. Although the clones had superior numbers, they had almost no defense. Any damage dealt would result in them exploding. In just a few minutes, the group completely ended the fight. What they didn't know was that another clone had been assisting Brad all along.
What is this? This is a joke! Where is he? Where is he?
Meanwhile, Lucas picked up a worm and declared his feelings for Margot. Incredibly, the worm crawled directly into Lucas's body. Margot found it utterly disgusting and rejected his confession on the spot. Undeterred, Lucas insisted that these creatures were high in protein. That very night, all the insects he brought out of the haunted house poured out of the glass cabinet and crawled into his body through his nostrils. By the next day, Lucas discovered that his body had become extraordinarily strong. He felt no pain when he hit his hand against the wardrobe, and even when he fell down the stairs, he felt nothing. To test his newfound strength, he placed his hand in the door gap. Watching his fingers gradually heal, Lucas felt a sense of wonder. Unbeknownst to him, a pair of eyes was watching him closely from the corner of the room. Ever since being possessed by the evil spirit, Brad had tried every means to target the townspeople. Meanwhile, Lucas was still lost in excitement, completely unaware of the seriousness of the situation. He began experimenting with various ways to feel his newfound strength. Not only did he ride a motorcycle on the roof, but he also smashed the principal's car beyond recognition. Lucas showed Margot how his fractured arm was healing. When Margot saw the writhing worms beneath Lucas's skin, she realized that the evil spirit from the haunted house had targeted him. In a panic, she rushed to find Nora, who happened to be Lucas's mother. Understanding the danger posed by the evil spirit, Nora immediately drove off to find Lucas after hearing about his experiences. At that moment, Lucas was excitedly preparing to leap off a cliff. Just in time, Nora and Margot arrived to prevent Lucas from crashing to the ground. Suddenly, something abnormal happened to Lucas's body. The worms exited his body and quickly gathered together, transforming into an ugly monster. To protect his mom, Lucas chose to ride away on his bike to divert the monster. Nora and Margot drove towards the factory they had agreed upon. There, they found a large crushing machine that should be able to kill the monster once and for all. The trio successfully reached the factory before the monster caught up with them. Taking advantage of the moment when the monster was blocked by the doors, Lucas instructed the two of them to start the machine while he lured the monster away on his bike. Although the process was incredibly dangerous, they ultimately managed to dispose of the monster. However, the commotion drew attention from the surrounding area. Nora urged Lucas and Margot to quickly leave in their car, while she stayed behind to explain to the police. She revealed everything that had been happening, but as a result, she was deemed mentally ill and locked away. Nora desperately tried to convince others of the evil spirit's revenge, but unfortunately, no one believed her. Margot flipped open a mysterious notebook, only to see long-dead people appearing before her eyes. She quickly realized that this notebook had the ability to traverse time and space. By looking at the contents recorded in the appropriate locations, she could travel back to the past. In the past segments, Margot discovered that her mother had known Biddle. They seemed to have been classmates, but Margot had never heard her mother mention this. Subsequently, Margot gathered her friends at the theater to explain the notebook's capabilities. She planned to continue examining its contents to return to the past and uncover the reasons behind all the bizarre occurrences. She requested her friends to guard her and awaken her if they noticed anything unusual. As Margot opened the notebook to read it, the scenes around her began to change. Suddenly, Biddle and her mother appeared on the stage. Biddle, looking anxious, indicated that someone was out to harm him, but he hesitated to specify who. Margot's mother sensed Biddle's tension and, disregarding his pleas, turned to leave the theater. Margot thought the matter was over, but unexpectedly Biddle suddenly turned around and looked at her.
I'm not gonna let you leave me.
Come with me.
As Margot's eyes changed, everyone quickly noticed something was wrong. The notebook in Margot's hands began to flip pages on its own, while she sat motionless. Seeing this, Isabella immediately realized that Margot's soul must be trapped within the notebook. In fact, this was all part of a carefully orchestrated scheme by Biddle. He manipulated Brad into giving the notebook to Margot, leading her to the revelations concerning her mother. Indeed, Margot had checked the notebook and traveled back to the past, discovering that her mother was Biddle's classmate. Yet, what she didn't know was that the parents of her other friends were also acquainted with Biddle. Only Nora firmly believed that Biddle would come back for revenge. but no one believed her and she was even locked up in a mental hospital.
I want him.
At this moment, Isaiah and the others were still trying to wake Margot up. Even resorting to physical force, they could not revive her. James noted that the notebook corresponded to the haunted house and speculated that Margot's soul must have gone there. The group quickly made their way to the house. Meanwhile, Biddle had also dragged Margot's soul there. Margot asked him what he intended to do, but Biddle did not answer. He merely pointed ahead. It turned out that on the night he was burned alive, someone had played a prank on him. They rang his doorbell intentionally, and while he went out to check, they sneaked in through the side door. They then created various noises to scare Biddle, causing him to hide in the basement. Those individuals even crazily banged on the basement door. Just then, Biddle suddenly sends Margot into the basement, leaving her standing in Biddle's original position. Immediately afterward, she fell down the stairs, as did Biddle. The fallen candle quickly ignited a fire, and Biddle sat nearby, coldly watching her. This was the truth behind Biddle's death. He wanted Margot to experience the pain of being burned alive. Fortunately, Isaiah and the others managed to penetrate the notebook just in time to rescue Margot. When they escaped the house and looked back, they saw the true faces of those people. Then, their parents left with a mysterious box. No one expected that it would be several people's parents who were responsible for Biddle's death, which was why Biddle's vengeful spirit had come after them. The realization that their own relatives were murderers was too much for them to process. Simultaneously, they were baffled about what exactly was in that box. At this point, they lacked the courage to continue investigating. Just as they were about to give up, Brat's figure suddenly appeared before them.
Come inside. I'll tell you all about it.
The withdrawn Biddle gets a weird doll, followed by an accident with Biddle's parents.
Use the spell. Adana. Min. What's happening? Kudarish.
As the spell concluded, Biddle's parents transformed into puppets. A few days prior, Biddle's family had moved into the house left to them by his grandfather. Since Biddle had frequently endured bullying at school, his parents decided to change environments and move to the town. However, Biddle's naturally introverted personality made him prone to collecting peculiar items. Even though he attempted to befriend his new classmates, they still distanced themselves from him. This made Biddle, who was originally looking forward to a new environment, extremely angry. He started to smash things at home and made a big hole in the wall. Curiously, he approached and discovered an old box hidden inside. Inside the box, he found a strange puppet that brought him immense joy. Excitedly, he showcased the puppet to his parents, completely unaware of its terrifying nature. Soon, Biddle found a note with strange incantations written on it within the puppet's clothing. Without any reservations, he read the incantation out loud, triggering a series of bizarre events. To gain his classmates' acceptance, Biddle brought the puppet onto stage to perform. However, the puppet seemed to have its own consciousness, capable of speaking on its own. Biddle began to sweat profusely from fear, yet his peers were captivated by the performance, showering him with praise. Biddle relished this feeling, and the puppet took advantage of this to further manipulate his emotions. One day, a blonde girl accidentally witnessed their conversation, which sparked the puppet's murderous intent. As Biddle continued interacting with the puppet, his parents started to notice something was off. Whenever they mentioned the puppet, Biddle would become unusually agitated, even lashing out at his mother. The parents believe that it is the creepy puppet that is affecting Biddle and force the puppet to stay in the house. As it turned out, they were correct. The puppet had initially appeared in a rundown antique shop. Biddle's grandfather, a magician, discovered the puppet and spent all his savings to buy it, desperate to change his fortunes. The impoverished grandfather found that the puppet not only possessed self-awareness but could also speak. He began taking the puppet on stage for performances, quickly rising to fame. However, over time, the puppet began to influence the grandfather's behavior. Not only did his whole personality change, but he left his wife and children because of it and only thought about staying with puppets. Years later, the elderly grandfather finally recognized the puppet's evil side. It began to encourage him to kill. In a trance-like state, the grandfather recited the incantations taught to him by the puppet, instantly transforming the person before him into a puppet. After that, he helped the puppet kill many people, yet the puppet remained unsatisfied, urging him to burn down an entire building. At this moment, the grandfather finally regained his clarity and refused to assist the puppet in its misdeeds any longer. He stuffed the puppet back into the box and purchased an estate in the suburbs, hiding the box behind the walls. However, the Biddle family moves into the manor and accidentally breaks down the walls. In an attempt to restore their son to his former self, Biddle's parents decided to destroy the puppet while he was away. Strangely enough, Despite trying various methods, they could not destroy it. When Biddle returned home, the puppet incited him to recite the incantation. Under the puppet's spell, Biddle wasted no time in transforming his parents into puppets. Freed from his parents' constraints, Biddle began to develop the idea of turning everyone at school into puppets as well. However, Nora and the others noticed Biddle's unusual behavior, prompting them to secretly steal the puppet that night. They donned black clothing and quietly rang the doorbell to Biddle's house, slipping into the basement while he went to check who was at the door. As eerie occurrences unfolded, Biddle, feeling frightened, quickly hid in the basement. Although they successfully stole the puppet, they were extremely worried about Biddle's safety. They knocked frantically on the door, urging him to come out. But in his panic, Biddle fell down the stairs. A candle fell to the ground, instantly igniting a fire. By the time the group escaped the house, the basement exploded, and Biddle was burned alive inside. Witnessing Biddle die right before their eyes filled them with terror. At that moment, the puppet magically emerged from the box. Ultimately, they decided to bury the puppet in an abandoned mine and quickly fled the scene. Little did they know that decades later, Brat would tell their children all about the events that had transpired back then. Brat believed that their parents were the killers of Biddle. However, the children unanimously thought that it was the evil puppet that caused Biddle's demise and that their parents simply wanted to help him. Hearing this, Brat suddenly became extremely agitated, angrily declaring that their parents were to blame. Not only had they broken into his home to steal his best friend, but they had also watched as he was burned alive. Faced with Brat's accusations, the others began to notice something was off. After all, Brat wasn't from the town. There was no way he could know these details.
I know all this because I'm not Mr. Brat.
I'm Harold Biddle.
When the boy opened the door, he found himself facing nothingness. Previously, while recounting the origins of all these eerie events, Brat had silently pulled them all into the notebook, trapping their souls inside. Now, they were unable to escape from this predicament and could only hope that their parents would notice something amiss and come to rescue them. However, they hadn't anticipated that Brat had already sent a message to their parents via their phones, informing them that he would not be home that night. This ultimately extinguished their hopes of escaping. Currently, the only one aware of Biddle's vengeful actions was Lucas's mother, Nora. At this moment, she had successfully escaped from the psychiatric hospital. Just as she was preparing to leave the building via the elevator, she unexpectedly encountered Brat, who was possessed by Biddle. He greeted her warmly. Confused, Nora caught a glimpse of Biddle through the elevator door's reflection. Unexpectedly,
And I want it back now! Hey!
the puppet Biddle was looking for was in Nora's hands all along. To prevent the puppet from causing further harm, Nora decided to take it away and dispose of it in another location. Her boyfriend noticed her unusual behavior and kept questioning her, but Nora refused to divulge any information. With no other option, her boyfriend went to find Ben. Upon discovering that Nora had left carrying a puppet, Ben immediately sensed something was wrong. He hurried to the abandoned mine to search for the box they had buried there years ago. However, he didn't find the box but encountered the strangely behaving James instead.
What the hell are you doing it? Did your mom tell you about this?
Well, she's not my mom, but I am gonna deal with her as soon as I'm done with you.
James immediately tossed down a rope meant for escape, trapping Ben inside the mine. Shortly after, James came across Ben's mother, who was waiting by the car. Without hesitation, he picked up a stick from the ground and swung it at her. Just in time, Ben emerged from the mine and rushed over to intercept James. James's mother picked up a stick from the ground and swung it at James's head. The two were stunned, realizing that Nora had been telling the truth. The Biddle who had burned to death had returned for revenge. Meanwhile, several young people were anxiously searching for a way to escape. At that moment, Brat's spirit suddenly appeared. Ever since Biddle had taken over his body, Brat had been trapped there. After some explanation, the group came to believe that this Brat was genuine. Unfortunately, he had no way to escape either. The only possible exit was a bright spot beneath the black fog. The group decided to take the risk. They tore down all the curtains in the room and tied them around the relatively light Isabella. Isabella told everyone that pulling once meant all was well, but pulling twice meant danger, and they needed to pull her back up immediately. Once they were ready, Isabella slowly descended through the curtains. Fortunately, the bright spot was not far away, and Isabella quickly reached the ground. But what she didn't expect was that this was actually their school. However, the furnishings here were somewhat different from those now, and it looked like a scene from decades ago. Here she not only saw the lockers that Biddle had used, but also discovered a large number of puppets that were transformed from living people in the broadcasting room. Terrified, Isabella quickly ran back, frantically pulling on the rope to signal her companions to pull her up. Simultaneously, Biddle was in the process of destroying the contents of the notebook. The school where Isabella was located began to collapse rapidly. Biddle, who was driving, sensed a physical abnormality. Just moments ago, Brat's spirit had returned to its original body but was quickly reclaimed by Biddle. When Isabella was pulled back up, Brat immediately shared his recent discoveries with the group. They realized that if they could help Brat regain control of his body and find the exit in the notebook, everyone could escape. Thus, they began to beat Brat frantically. This method proved effective, as Brat's spirit successfully returned to his body, and he saw Nora not far away. However, just as he was about to call out to her, his body slipped back under Biddle's control. With no other choice, the group once again exerted all their strength to help Brat regain his body. Just as he reached for the notebook to search for an exit, Biddle fought him for control once more. During the struggle, the notebook accidentally fell into a puddle by the roadside. The water immediately rushed into the house where the people were from all directions. It wouldn't be long before they were drowned. This was a weird puppet that killed countless people. To prevent it from continuing its evil ways, Nora had sealed its mouth and planned to take it to a snowy mountain, hiding it in a place where no one could find it. Little did Nora know that her child and her friends were facing a significant crisis. They were trapped within Biddle's notebook, and the house was about to be flooded. Fortunately, Brat, still struggling for control with Biddle, managed to retrieve the notebook from the puddle. As their pages turned, the group was transported to the basement. There, they encountered Biddle's parents, who, although turned into puppets, had never blamed Biddle. Therefore, they had been waiting for him after their death. Biddle's parents hope that after they escape from here, they can tell Biddle that he will always be their child. At this moment, Brat continued to fight for control of his body, successfully drawing an exit on the notebook, which allowed the young people to be saved. Fearing Biddle would harm Nora, they immediately prepared to go help her. Meanwhile, Biddle had once again taken over Brat's body and was quickly heading after Nora. On the other side, Nora encountered trouble. A police officer saw her running up the mountain with a bag on her back during the heavy snow, and asked what was in the bag. Though Nora didn't mean any harm, the officer insisted she open her backpack. Upon seeing the scattered puppets, the officer relaxed. When the police officer was going down the mountain, he met Biddle, who was chasing Nora. Biddle lied that he was Nora's friend and soon learned Nora's location from the police officer. He rushed to the mountaintop cabin, where he found Nora just as she was about to leave. Without hesitation, Nora prepared to escape in her car. When the engine stalled, she had to abandon the vehicle and run. Biddle, injured in his right leg from the earlier collision, could not catch up, so he shifted his voice to sound like Nora's son, successfully luring her over. By the time Nora realized something was off, it was too late. Biddle not only snatched the backpack but also pushed her down the snowy slope. As Biddle obtained the puppet, he quickly reassembled it. Meanwhile, the group of friends had arrived at the snowy mountain, urgently searching for Nora. Isaiah behind him accidentally slipped off the cliff, but fortunately he grabbed a vine. However, the two in front were entirely unaware of what was happening behind them and continued searching for Nora. Finally, they found Nora, who had fainted in the snow, while Isaiah was still struggling to hold onto the cliff. The puppet and Biddle quickly discovered Isaiah, and just as Biddle picked up a stone, Nora and the others arrived just in time. Shortly after, Van and the rest reached the scene. They sincerely apologized to Biddle, explaining that everything that had happened that night was due to the evil puppet. To gain Biddle's trust, they shared the story of Biddle's parents, conveying that they never blamed him and had been waiting for him in the notebook. Biddle finally came to his senses. He not only pulled Isaiah up, but also threw the puppet that had been bewitching him off the cliff. After doing so, Biddle returns control of his body to Brat and disappears along with his parents, who have been waiting for him. Originally thought everything was over, but unexpectedly, the puppet at the bottom of the cliff opened its eyes again. In just one night, everyone in the small town transformed into puppets. The source of all these events turned out to be a man who had lived for 200 years. In 1879, Kandu was struck in the abdomen during a battle. Shortly after, a cannonball sent him into a mysterious cave. Inside, he discovered many ancient spells etched into the walls. Severely injured, he attempted to recite a healing spell recorded there. To his astonishment, his abdominal wound healed at an observable pace. Realizing the power of these spells, Kandu recorded them all in a notebook. After leaving the battlefield, he traveled the world as a magician, having experienced the horrors of war. He became acutely aware of humanity's greed. Thus, he planned to complete the sacrificial tower depicted on the walls to open a gateway to hell. He encountered Mahar, who was hosting a carnival, and showcased his ability to control puppets. Mahar was thrilled, and the two quickly became friends. However, as people in the town began to disappear, Mahar sensed that something was amiss. Those missing individuals had all been transformed into puppets by Kandu. Mahar, confused by Kandu's motives, grew increasingly horrified as he witnessed the transformation of living beings into mindless puppets. Determined to stop Kandu, Mahar modified the puppet they had met during their first encounter and presented it as a gift to Kandu. Thrilled by this gift, Kandu viewed the puppet as a meaningful keepsake. In that moment, Mahar seized the opportunity to quietly recite a sealing spell he had learned from Kandu. As he heard the incantation, Kandu grabbed a dagger in an attempt to stop Mahar. However, Mahar was resolute in his decision to seal Kandu away, resulting in Kandu's soul being imprisoned within the puppet. Even so, Kandu still did not give up. He wanted to collect the souls needed for the sacrifice by capturing everyone who got him. It was not until Biddle threw the puppet off the cliff that the puppet's body was broken into pieces, which temporarily stopped his plan. But everything did not end there. After Biddle vanished, Brat regained control of his body. However, due to financial struggles, he began making money through writing, documenting all his recent experiences in a novel. Unexpectedly, as soon as his novel was sent out, it attracted great praise from the editor-in-chief of the magazine. The only flaw was that the ending was too bland. The editor-in-chief hoped that he could rewrite it and guaranteed that his novel would be a hit all over the country. Despite days of deep contemplation, Brad could not come up with a better ending. Eager for financial freedom, he took a risk by bringing the puppet from the bottom of the snowy mountain back to his home. He recited the spells inscribed on the puppet, and in an instant, the puppet rapidly reassembled itself. Under the puppet's influence, Brad unearthed an old coffin and recited the spell provided by it. Unbeknownst to him, his actions would bring catastrophic consequences to the entire town. As a pair of dry hands opens the coffin, an ancient and evil body appears before Brad's eyes, and it's none other than Kandu, who is sealed in the body of a puppet. In just a moment's time, Ben is transformed into a soulless puppet. What Kandu has to do next is to gather the 1,000 souls needed for the sacrifice. Disguised as Lucas's father, he appeared before Lucas, but Lucas was too terrified to acknowledge him since his father had died years ago, until Nora showed up and told her son that her husband had to fake his death in order to complete a secret mission. Now that the incident is over, their family can finally be reunited. It was not until this moment that Lucas finally believed what he said. When Lucas reached out to touch Kandu's hand, they both transformed into puppets. Before long, nearly everyone in town had been turned into puppets by Kandu, except for Isaiah and a few others who were alert enough to escape his grasp. They sought a way to break the spell, but everyone else had already become puppets. Ultimately, they were captured by Kandu and taken to the location of the tower. Kandu explained that humanity's greed had led to relentless warfare, so he decided to open the gates of hell and let demons cleanse the world to save it. Brat was filled with regret, realizing that his greed had plunged all of humanity into an abyss from which there was no return. In desperation, he revealed to the others that he was a descendant of Mahar. Perhaps it was because of his family's inheritance that made him believe Kandu's words without a doubt. Brat learned from the records in the manuscript that Mahar used a spell to seal Kandu when he was not paying attention. It immediately occurred to several people that they might be able to reseal Kandu through the spell Mahar had left behind. That way not only would tonight's crisis be lifted, but their parents could be restored to their former selves. They summoned Mahar through the spell, hoping he would help them rebind Kandu. To their shock, Mahar chose to side with Kandu, agreeing with his plan and even igniting the tower himself. Flames burst into the sky, and while Kandu thought his long-awaited desire was about to be fulfilled, he suddenly morphed into a puppet. It turned out that everything was a fabricated illusion created by Brat using the spell, aimed at sealing Kandu once more. However, just as they thought the crisis had been averted, Kandu transformed back into his true form. He asserted that the puppet spell was ineffective against him and that everything they did was futile. With no other options, Isaiah threatened Kandu with the spell book, but Kandu had long since mastered those incantations. Kandu then initiated the ritual to open the gates of hell, unleashing a horde of vengeful spirits towards them. In a panic, Isaiah waved the spellbook and discovered it could disperse the spirits. He quickly saved Margot and rushed toward Kanduu, who was about to reignite the tower. In the meantime, Margot found a reversal spell and recited it. As Kandu was about to be dragged into hell by the undead, he angrily pointed his gun at Margot. Isaiah moved instinctively to shield Margot, and as Kandu was pulled into the depths of hell, the townspeople returned to their original forms. The group hurried to take the wounded Isaiah to the hospital, but due to the critical nature of his injuries, the doctors could do little to help. Grief swept over everyone, but Margot refused to accept the situation. She retrieved the spellbook and recited a restoration spell, miraculously bringing Isaiah back to life. Isaiah's resurrection alleviated much of the guilt in Brat's heart. Just as he thought everything was finally over, he raised his gaze to find that wicked face staring back at him once more.